Who are you? What's your role? And who do you work for?
Hi, yeah, I'm Nick Walker. I'm the Director of Product at StormForge, where we do continuous workload right-sizing.
What are 3 Kubernetes emerging tools that you are keeping an eye on?
I'm keeping an eye on vCluster, NOS, and Prometheus 3.0. So I use vCluster myself when I'm doing development. I need to set up demos for different things, and we needed multiple clusters with different workloads in them. And it's a lot easier for me to spin up some virtual clusters inside a single cloud-provided cluster, so I don't have to wait as long for the clusters to spin up. It just takes a minute or two with vCluster. And then for NOS, this is a tool that does GPU fractionalization or partitioning. And that's very interesting because everyone's looking at AI ML workloads these days running on GPUs. And once you start running a workload on a GPU, you know that's your most expensive workload. So we're looking at it specifically because we're interested in optimizing GPU workloads, and being able to figure out how to set that fractionalization or that partitioning will be interesting for us. And then finally for Prometheus 3.0, not exactly an emerging tool, I'd say, but with the 3.0 release, we're seeing a lot of performance improvements in it, where it's going to cut resources by about 50% and the amount of data that needs to be sent over the wire by the same amount. That's going to be really good for us in our platform, but it's also going to be great for the community because everyone uses Prometheus for monitoring.
Now, on the side of if we're thinking about governance, requests and limits, one of our podcast guests, Alexandra, stated that being conservative on requests can be painful in large clusters. How do you approach resource allocation in environments with many uncontrolled workloads?
Yeah, so I have sort of like a pre-automated approach that I think about and an automated approach that I think about. So before automation, I often see people setting their requests and limits as defaults in a Helm template. And I think we can just probably be more aggressive there as a community. Bring those default requests and limits down in your Helm template, because then when you stamp out hundreds or thousands of those in your cluster, you'll get a better utilization overall. And the ones that are going over requests anyways, you'll probably need to increase. But that's also still a lot of toil. And so I think what we need to move towards is an automated approach where you have a tool looking at the usage behind the scenes and providing the recommended requests and limits. And that's basically what we do at StormForge.
We're thinking about auto scaling, particularly Carpenter. Our podcast guest, Ghazal, prefers Carpenter over Cluster Autoscaler for cluster autoscaling, highlighting its benefits and reliability. In particular, Ghazal and his team use Carpenter to consolidate workloads and save around 40% of their cloud bill. Carpenter was also donated from AWS to the Kubernetes project. How do you think this will shape the future of autoscaling in Kubernetes?
Yeah, so that 40% number that we're hearing for Carpenter, that's interesting. We see that as well. About half those savings are usually coming from the improved bin packing and node consolidation that Carpenter's doing. And then the other half is just coming from the increased spot usage that you can get from adopting Carpenter, because it makes it a lot safer and more reliable to use spot instances in a cluster. As to how I think that the donation of the Carpenter project will affect it going forward, we've now seen that it's been picked up by another cloud provider who's also using Carpenter. And so I think that's going to make Carpenter a more de facto standard going forward for cluster autoscaling. And I think just the fact that it makes cluster autoscaling more native in the cloud is going to be a positive for the community going forward.
Taking autoscaling one step further, related to the Keda project, our podcast guest Jorge argued that Kubernetes-based scaling solutions like Keda offer advantages over traditional monitoring methods like Prometheus, especially regarding responsiveness. How do you autoscale workloads in Kubernetes? What metrics do you use? And are there any tips and tricks that people should know?
Yeah, so at StormForge, we actually do use Keda in the background. And so we are horizontally scaling our machine worker pools based on a queue of recommendations that are coming into our platform. As for any tips, I guess it's kind of a basic tip, but I think that people should be looking to use custom metrics for their HPA. A lot of people use CPU target utilization, which is pretty easy to use out of the box with the HPA, but I would argue that that's a lagging indicator. It's already usage that you have on your application. And what we can move towards is using custom metrics from a queue, for example, which is more of a predictive indicator of how much work is coming into your application, which will make your scaling more reliable.
Kubernetes turned 10 years old this year. What should we expect in the next 10 years to come?
I hope we can see Kubernetes get a little bit more boring over the next 10 years. So we're releasing 3 times a year, I think. People have to take all these upgrades. I hope the upgrades get easier and that we get more robustness, security, all that type of stuff, and a little less of these major changes that make it more difficult for people to take the upgrades.
What's next for you?
What's next for me? Leading up into KubeCon, I've been looking at Java workload optimization and talking to a lot of people about the issues they've had trying to right-size Java workloads. And that's a particular interest for me going forward, is just understanding the nuances of how to optimize a Java workload and see how we can help with that.
How can people get in touch with you?
You can find us at stormforge.io. And then if you want to find me, I'm Nick Walker, StormForge on LinkedIn.